0 to 100 Celsius is like a little tiny, narrow temperature range, but we just happen to live in exactly the right place. If you moved the Earth just a little bit, the place would be solid or it would be gas, like the other planets. We happen to live in exactly the right spot. If you look at that middle star over there on the left, that's the equivalent size of our sun, and where that blue planet is in that wet zone is the Earth. If we had a bigger sun or a smaller sun, or if we were in a slightly different spot, there'd be no life. We are cradled in exactly the right place for there to be liquid water, because what you actually are, what every life form actually is liquid water. Planet that's covered in a hydrosphere, that's all the water that's here, and it's that many gallons. I don't know how to say that. You know, you've heard that thing that 3/4 of the Earth is covered in what? Water. In what? Yeah, 3/4 of it. But the map that we usually look at, because we're anthropocentric, we usually look at maps of where we live. So maybe we don't notice. But you ever seen the Earth from the Pacific side? That's the Pacific Ocean. That's not changed. That's not modified with computers. That's the Pacific view of our Earth. You can see Mexico, right? Baja, Mexico up there in the upper right. And what you're seeing down at that other end is like Polynesian. We live on a little island, by the way. We like to talk about our different continents, and we like to talk about our different countries. We actually all live on a little island on one side of the Earth. See that? It's perspective, right? Wow, there's a lot of water here. This is a unique planet. And if we were even in galactic terms, if we were even a couple inches away, then it wouldn't be like that. There's like a force of love keeping us here. It's really amazing. We're really blessed. So that's the hydrological cycle. You know, the hydrological cycle is the largest movement of any chemical on the Earth. Water is moving all around the Earth all the time. And a lot of us remember from school learning about the hydrological cycle, and we learned about evaporation, condensation, cooling, rain coming down, filling the oceans and lakes, and then evaporating back up. And that does happen. But one of the things we didn't learn about then, because it wasn't considered as important because we weren't starting to dry up as a planet yet, was this other part. It's infiltration. And you can see that in the lower left corner there, where the water's infiltrating back down into the Earth. And that fills up the aquifers. That's our underground water storage tanks. And that's where springs come from. And you can see there where it says spring, where the water's coming back up out of the ground. Water that stays on the top part of the hydrological cycle, the evaporation, the raining down, the evaporating, the raining down, it concentrates all the chemicals and all the pollution that we're putting on the Earth. But I want you to think about what happens when water infiltrates the ground. And by the way, it can take thousands and thousands of years for water to get down into those aquifers sometimes. Think about a water filter. Everybody seen a Brita water filter before? So it's like basically like a little piece of plastic with some sand in it, right? And it will clean water to some degree. To some degree. So think about what the Earth is doing when water that's polluted, say acid rain, falls down on the ground. And the first thing it's got to go through is the atmosphere, which pulls off a lot of the pollution that's in it already. And then it hits the ground, where it's treated by soil, a living organism. Soil microbes, roots, funguses, and it's cleaned up a lot. And then that water makes its way down through sand. 60 feet of sand is a water filter, by the way. Makes its way down through sand. Eventually, it makes its way down through clay deposits. Does clay detoxify things? Does clay detoxify things? So it makes its way down through detoxifying clay. Maybe even through carbon deposits. Does carbon detoxify things? Yes. Makes its way down through carbon deposits. Finds its way down into an aquifer where it sits in the darkness and the cold for thousands of years. Then slowly, and as David's probably been talking about levitationally, water makes its way back to the surface as a spring, right? And then you go to the spring and you get some water, and that water might have been underground for 10,000 years. And 10,000 years ago, was there BP oil spills? Yeah. So that water might be the cleanest water in the world. Might be. I think it is. But you know, water, what I want to talk about is that water's a crystal. And a crystal, like what's a crystal? Picture crystals. Everyone close your eyes for 1 second. Close your eyes, picture a crystal. A diamond, a quartz, whatever you want. Picture a crystal. Got it? Here's what a crystal is in molecular terms. A crystal or a crystalline solid is a material whose atoms or molecules, in other words, the little building blocks of the material, of the quartz, of the diamond, the molecules or ions, whatever it's made of, are arranged in an orderly, repeating pattern, extending in all dimensions. In other words, a crystal is made up of little parts that are really organized in every direction. They're not random. That's why it's a crystal. And a crystal, the molecules are arranged in a formation. If there's an orderly formation, and that word formation is where we get the word information. And information means something's organized in a formation, right? And that's why crystals can transmit information and store information, because your computer chip is made of crystal, silicon crystal, quartz. In the future, it'll be made of diamond and water. Because crystals storing information and transmitting information is not just a hokey, new agey Sedona thing. It's also what makes your MacBook work. It's what makes your iPhone work. That is totally advanced new age technology. That's all that airy-fairy new age stuff applied to science and made to work. Crystals store information. Crystals transmit information. Now, water is a really interesting dipole molecule, and what happens is it's a balanced molecule in its electrical charge, except those two H's are kind of like boys, and the O is kind of like a girl. And what happens is the O side is a little bit attracted to other boys, and those two H sides a little bit attracted to other girls. And when you get them all together and they're all hanging out in a little water party, they start to align themselves. Can you see that? And if they align themselves, because of almost like the way magnets, the North Pole's looking for what pole? South. Water's like that. The North Pole of water is looking for a South Pole of another water. And if you get a whole bunch of water together, it wants to organize like that. That's two ways of looking at the molecular arrangement of crystalline water. Now, we see that physically with our eyes when we see water in the form of ice, right? Snow, crystals, snowflake. Snowflake look organized to you? Looks organized to me too. But we don't notice it with liquid water because water to our eye is transparent liquid. So we don't see that it has structure or organization to it. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of an analogy. Here's two substances made of the same thing but are very different in behavior. On the left, these are molecules of silicon dioxide. That's a molecule not unlike water. Silicon dioxide is quartz, and it's also glass. Quartz crystal is extremely organized. Do you see that one over there on the left? You see how organized the molecules are into those star tetrahedrons? That's how quartz crystal's aligned. See the one on the right with no order to it at all? That's what glass is. Glass and quartz crystal are the same stuff. Can you use glass for computer chips? Because it has no formation, therefore it doesn't have information. Does that make sense? Whereas quartz is the same exact ingredients, different formation to it. That's why if you drop glass, it just shatters. But if you drop a quartz crystal, it cleaves along fracture lines, and you get these straight lines in its fracturing. Does that make sense? Because when you break it, see if you broke that one on the left, how it would break in an orderly way? That's called cleavage. Crystals do that. Glass is disorganized. It breaks and shatters. Everybody with me on that? That's an analogy. I want you to just think about what the structure of water's like. See how organized that is? See how crystalline that is? Okay, I want you to think about this. That's probably 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius, right? It's frozen. Imagine that we started to heat that up, liquefy it, just barely. Would all that order just disappear suddenly? Or would it sort of maintain itself, but it would sort of maintain itself like a flow? It's kind of like if we got a whole bunch of people up here and we all stood like a chessboard, really organized. And then we all started to move, but we held on to some of that order. Does that make sense? That's what liquid water can be. Can be a liquid crystal. Here's a little depiction of that. So on the far left, you have solid state water or ice, and then liquid. Now, when water becomes a gas, and you've seen this because you've boiled water before, And you've seen what happens with steam. That's when the water leaves that bonding and disappears into the atmosphere. That's how you disorganize water. That's how you erase the crystal. Does that make sense? But if you can maintain some of the structure of water, you can make a liquid crystal out of it. Water can store information in the crystal. Who's heard of homeopathy? Homeopathy is where you take water and it has a medicinal effect, essentially, because somebody put information in the water. It's been around since the 1700s. Here's how that works. If that sounds totally hokey to you, here I'm going to give you a little analogy. Is there a hand there? Is there a human hand there? Is there a physiological flesh and blood hand there? But there's a hand there, right? It's the memory of a hand. The memory of a hand is stored in the organizational pattern of those little individual parts. Right? If that thing was totally disordered, it couldn't hold on to the information of the hand. But because it's orderly, you can store the memory of the hand in it. Water that's highly crystalline can remember things. That's how homeopathy works, and that's how the future of many of our computer technologies are going to work. In the same way you can use silicon dioxide, they're going to be able to use water to do the same thing. Everybody with me right now? Yeah. Cool. I really believe that our bodies are designed to drink and consume and be built out of crystalline water because we were all drinking water from the ecosystem, water that had never been polluted, water that never had a bad memory, water that was organized in deep aquifers and brought to the surface of the earth. And the reason that we like to settle our towns around springs, and that's why if you get out a map of the United States or Canada and you look at the names, you see a lot of like Manitou Springs, Colorado Springs, the town where I grew up, Springvale. Because people like to be around springs because that was the highest, most ordered water, and that makes you feel the best. Everybody with me on that? But right now, what we're doing, and you know, I was talking the other day, hinting the other night about wild food, and talking about my experiences with wild food. And what I've come to understand is there's such a thing as wild water, and that just sounds very funny to people because we've been taught to see all water as the same. And if you look in your own mind, you'll see you were taught to see all water as the same. Boiled water is the same as dehydrated. Distilled water is the same as RO water. All water is the same, and the only way we think about water is this has got stuff in it or not. When we ask if a water is a good water, we mean is there stuff in it? Or is it clean? There's a whole nother story we haven't thought of. Does it have information in it? Or has it been erased? Does it have good information in it, or does it have bad information in it? Does that make sense? That's a qualitative difference, not a quantitative difference. We've been in a world of quantifying chemicals, so we think, is there dirt in this? Is there chemicals in this? Is there fluoride in this? Is there chlorine in this? Well, guess what? You can take the hand away and still have the hand memory. You can take the chlorine away, but maybe you still have the chlorine's memory. And just in the same way that your mind is seeing a hand that's not there, your body might be experiencing chlorine that's not there. Does that make sense? And rather than drinking wild water, and I want to put this into the collective mind, we've been drinking processed water. Right? We think about processed food, and we're very comfortable with that idea now. Right? Your great-grandparents, processed food wasn't a bad thing. And there's a reason for that we're not going to get into, but it wasn't a bad thing. Today, we hear processed food, we're like, oh, that's not good.